I'm Ron Strickland. This webcast is one of a series in which I'm presenting some brief lectures and commentaries on topics from the courses I teach in literature and cultural studies. This particular episode is my fourth in a series of webcasts on Virginia Woolf's essay, A Room of One's Own. Here I'll look at what Virginia Woolf has to say about male experts on female authors. So she picks out a book by Mr. Oscar Browning, who's written his opinions about female students. Woolf says, I will quote Mr. Oscar Browning because Mr. Oscar Browning was a great figure in Cambridge at one time and used to examine the students at Girton College and at Newnham. Mr. Oscar Browning was wont to declare, quote, that the impression left on his mind after looking over any set of examination papers was that, irrespective of the marks he might give, the best woman was intellectually the inferior of the worst man. He could tell you that even before he reads the papers. He just knows it to be true because he's read so many papers. He always finds that it's borne out. And she gives other examples of this kind. Now she compares the situation of George Eliot to that of Tolstoy. Woolf says one of the women writers, it is true, George Eliot, escaped after much tribulation, but only to a secluded villa at St. John's Wood. There she settled down in the shadow of the world's disapproval. I wish it to be understood, she wrote, that I should never invite anyone to come and see me who did not ask for the invitation. She was that much ostracized, and completely ostracized by her society because she was an independent woman and she lived with a man who was married but left his wife. She was independent, but she paid a steep price for her independence in that society. And she just proclaims, don't worry. If you're worried that I will invite you to come for a visit and you'll have to turn me down because it would be disgraceful for you to be seen with me or associate with me. If you want to come and visit me, ask me to invite you and then I will invite you. Otherwise, don't worry, I won't embarrass you by inviting you, putting you in the position of having to turn down the invitation of the famous novelist because she seems a little bit immoral. Was she not living in sin with a married man, and might not the sight of her damage the chastity of Mrs. Smith, or whoever it might be that chanced to call? One must submit to the social convention and be cut off from what is called the world. At the same time, on the other side of Europe, there was a young man living freely with his gypsy or with that great lady, going to the wars, picking up unhindered and censored all the varied experience of human life, which served him so splendidly later when he came to write his books. Who was that? Lev Tolstoy, the great Christian writer. Had Tolstoy lived at the priory in seclusion with a married lady, cut off from what is called the world, however, edifying the moral lesson, he could scarcely, I thought, have written War and Peace. It takes some experience of the world to be a great novelist. So Tolstoy was such a man. That's what's available to men, not available to women in Shakespeare's time, still not available completely to women in Woolf's time and even in our time. So here's her conclusion. Genius, yes. A great writer needs genius, needs talent. But genius needs to eat in order to live. And she writes, here then Mary Beaton ceases to speak. She has told you how she reached the conclusion, the prosaic conclusion that it is necessary to have 500 a year and a room with a lock on the door if you are to write fiction or poetry. Women haven't written as much as men because they haven't had the material conditions that would make it possible. She has tried to lay bare the thoughts and impressions that led her to think this. She has asked you to follow her flying into the arms of a beetle, lunching here, dining there, drawing pictures in the British Museum, taking books from the shelf, looking out of the window. While she has been doing all these things, you no doubt have been observing her failings and foibles and deciding what effect they have had on her opinions. You have been contradicting her and making whatever additions and deductions seem good to you. That is all as it should be. She's acknowledging the stream of consciousness experience of her audience. That's all good and as it should be for a question like this. Truth, remember truth? We began with truth. She suggested that maybe fiction will get at a deeper truth than the facts will. That is all as it should be, for in a question like this, the truth is only to be had by laying together many varieties of error. And I will end now in my own person by anticipating two criticisms so obvious that you can hardly fail to make them. No opinion has been expressed in this speech, you may say, upon the comparative merits of the sexes, even as writers. That was done purposely because even if the time had come for such evaluation, and it is far more important at the moment to know how much money women had and how many rooms than to theorize about their capacities, even if the time had come, I do not believe that gifts, whether of mind or character, can be weighed like sugar and butter. Not even in Cambridge, where they are so adept at putting people into classes and fixing caps on their heads and letters after their name. I do not believe that even the table of precedency, which you will find in Whitaker's Almanac, represents a final order of values, or that there is any sound reason to suppose that a commander of the Bath will ultimately walk into dinner behind a master in lunacy. A commander of the Bath is a title bequeathed by British royalty to aristocrats who have a special honor. And a master in lunacy is a title that Woolf has made up for the occasion, but it seems to her to fit. All this pitting of sex against sex, of quality against quality, all this claiming of superiority and imputing of inferiority belong to the private school stage of human existence, where there are sides, and it is necessary for one side to beat another side, and of the utmost importance to walk up to a platform and receive from the hands of the headmaster himself a highly ornamented pot. As people mature, they cease to believe in sides or in headmasters or in highly ornamented pots. At any rate, where books are concerned, it is notoriously difficult to fix labels of merit in such a way that they do not come off. Are not reviews of current literature a perpetual illustration of the difficulty of judgment? This great book, this worthless book, the same book is called by both names. Praise and blame alike mean nothing. There's more to it than that. So that's where she ends. Women's fiction may be quite different from that written by Wynne, or may not. It's juvenile. This is high school stuff to try to sort out and proclaim that this writer is great, that writer is worthless. What's the point? So much better it would be to read women writers and male writers alike and recognize their benefits as they may be different without putting one down to raise the other up. And that's really what it is. One can only have a superior by identifying an inferior and making the superior then depend upon the rejection of the inferior. That's the way the patriarchal hierarchy has worked and still works. It's a good place to end for the moment today. With that, I'll conclude this webcast. But, as always, if you have questions or comments, please don't hesitate to send me an email.